Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I appreciate you joining me for today's discussion focusing on the 18th chapter of the book, Jesus in Our Days. So, as we keep moving with this program, I just wanted to remind, as I do every time, that this psychological series by the spiritual author Joanna de Angelis is powerful, it is impactful. And I am very, very honored to be here and present some of the main ideas found in this book. As a reminder, the intent of the series of live talks is to discuss those very insightful messages contained in the very first book of a series, which we call the psychological series. Jesus in Our Days is indeed a small book, and it was done in collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. Sorry for that. But we're here because we meet weekly and we review every 7 days, a single chapter. Excuse me. Sorry for that, a little technical glitch. But as we dive into the teachings of Jesus contained in this book, I'm particularly taken by how they continually um, touch me and impact me in a larger sense of like, whoa, I know this, but whoa. In any ways, it's just a series of talks where Joanna de Angelis, the author, presents us what she calls a uncrucified Jesus, which means a very human, a very alive man, and as we know, our role model. I invite you to welcome him in your life so that Jesus can help you and me be better prepared to address challenging situations we face. Jesus' therapeutical teachings will indeed help us attain peace, happiness, and health. And that's what we're going to be talking today. It's about the subject of Jesus' insecurity. And we start with the component of healing. And as you can see in the screen, we start the chapter and the book itself with this those words by Joanna. Whenever the ill and the infirm approached Jesus, he always asked them if they really wanted to be healthy and if they believed he could heal them. Fair, right? You come, you're going to bother me. I am Zen or I'm doing something. And you come to me, please, please, please do this for me. And he stops. Do you really want this? And do you believe I can help you with that? So, wanted to pause here because this is such a vast discussion in itself. So, very briefly, if we go to understand what even disease or to be infirm, to be ill means, I went to Oxford Dictionary and found that it defines disease, simply put, as a disorder. I love this disorder of structure of or function. So, illness is to have your structure or your function as a human, animal, plant, etc., is not in order. And it continues to say, especially one disease that has a known cause and a distinctive group of symptom signs or anatomical changes. Those are the symptoms. But uh, back to the chapter itself, I ask you, why do you think Jesus would stop the process and ask first? do you want? Is it your will? Do you have the will to be healthy and the faith, right? That this person will be healed by Jesus. So for Jesus, it was really important. In fact, was fundamentally important for that patient, the sick, or anyone wanting to be health, that he or she would reestablish their inner security. Remember, this is we're talking about the here today about this chapter on suffering. And he said, before we go in anywhere, how is the systems of how secure do you have that inside of you? So he looked at that and questioned about that specifically. And with that, he brings to us the idea that wanting and believing are the requirements for anyone to be well again. Wanting and believing. So Joanna says that those two requisites, as we can say here, are important and interesting because they complement each other. They are indeed essential for our physical and mental well-being and reestablishing the my if you will, my context, my ecosystem. I'm here, let's pretend, Jesus, I want to be healed, and I want and I believe, and when I do that, then the this context, this environment that is seeking help is ready, is reestablish that sense of readiness so that I can be healed. So again, referencing Oxford, right? Those two areas, wanting and believing, are essential for that reestablishment of the structure to the original state of well being. So, if I keep talking about this, we come with the notion of wanting, right? And Joanna reiterates that the notion of wanting is so important when she says that wanting intensely, unreservedly, completely alters ourselves. So it's not just, oh, I want another cup of coffee. Right. No, you really have to want, and you want intensely something and without reservations. And when you do this, our psychological and our physiological structures start to change, to alter, and we move from that state of imbalance to one of balance. My apologies. I recently had COVID and I still am coughing, so my apologies for that. So, as we come to discuss all of those things, we start to see and we start to conclude that illness is nothing more than the symptom of a lack of structure, or if I could use a bigger word, disarrangement. My spirit, right, that inhabits this body, my soul that inhabits this body, is not quite put together. You may need a little bit of restructure. And the expression in our bodies, the externalization of that is just a symptom, right? And one way to verify that the expression or the symptoms of something that is internal is seen when our minds, our bodies, our emotions are not quite in harmony, or they are indeed a demonstration of how confused we may be, disturbed, all of those things that are very much all embroiled and it expresses in our bodies, in our emotions, and in our um, psyche, right, in our brain. So Joanna in this book is quite firm when she will continue with this thought and this idea, and she explains to us that wanting means deciding, right? So if I want, I decide, right? And when I decide, I abandon, and she uses a terrible term. I'm going to say to you, those are Joanna de Angelis. She said to abandon our parasitical complacency. Whoa, right? So abandon our apathy, indifference, or in other words, using her words, complacency, or she even says, abandon our fear of committing, of assuming new responsibilities in relation to life. I stopped just to say, wow, this is good, Joanna. Thanks for being so firm. Thanks for being so direct, right? It's a question of deciding and moving out of our sense of inertia into whatever we're doing, into a new state of whatever. So she goes on to say that when we want something, right? And we abandon our sense of complacency, we then break the chains of, love it, persistent rebelliousness, right? Because we can just be doing something, and I can assure to you that as I even utter those words to you, I can come back into my young adult, late teenage years, and young adult years, where I could see that persistent rebelliousness against order, authority, and my planned life, my so-called planned life, and right, and I behaved this way when I was able to abandon that, when I was able to break away from my own set of behaviors, I was able to move on. Also, in addition to complacency, rebelliousness, she adds self pity, right? We can just immerse ourselves in this pool of self pity, and we must want enough and decide enough to abandon the sense of victimization and self pity to be able to do something else, right? Those are all defense mechanisms. We hide behind those things. And it's really important that Joanna is so clear to us, at least to me. So she mentions, as you can see in the slide, those who want invest. And to invest, they act in a way to reap the desired results. And it's such a simple set of words, but it really means a lot here. How about that? But let's move on to another aspect, which is another nuance to the same concept, which is now she moves on to talk about believing, right? So wanting and believing that you're going to get. And we come to grips with the idea that wanting, remember, she used the word without reservation, just persistently. There's this sense of commitment in the want, in the believe is, she moves on to say, it's, first and foremost, to believe is a serious decision, right? Because it really means from an emotional and human material maturity perspective, you are committed to the results. And as you see in the slide, she moves on to say two things about believing, and I love that. Is that it's really an innate quality of all the individuals, right? So she says, belief lives innate in the individual, waiting for the stimuli that will enable it, the belief, to blossom, injecting life with additional forces. And I have to stop here to say this goes both ways. If the belief is positive, when we provide the stimulus to make it blossom, it will, or the other way around. I love the book Strengths Finder. It's a business book, and but in that he talks about talent would be that belief that is innate, and the strength is the result for when we invest time in that talent, right? So in any case, she what Joanna means by that is that. There is an automatic natural belief, and she calls this the archetypical inheritance of past generations. Let me go back because it's a big term. Archetypical inheritance of past generations, and that the natural belief induces anyone to accept facts, ideas, past experience without having to analyze them rationally, right? And it's very interesting because there those universal truths almost dogmatic if you think about it, that you don't stop it, but why? And invite you and me to come back to it, and think again, ask again. Don't just accept, even though from an archetypical inheritance, we inherited this from our past generation. This is what is the norm. And back to Joanna, she says, well, this is one type of belief that based on those norms, but the other one is the belief that results from a logical, evidence-based, on events, and we can reason and we can say, yes, this makes sense. Excuse me again. So, archetypical inheritance is simply put a collectively inherited unconscious ideas. You don't have to think. So, it's a pattern of thought or image that is everywhere. Um, the way a Westerner thinks and behaves is very different than an Easterner, right? Those are the types of things that the Western culture brings this pattern of thought that is very different. So it is what you know. It is the ground that your ecosystem, as I mentioned before, that you work with. So it's there. So she says this for the simple notion that one believes, you and me believe based on that archetypical, which is very instinctual, right? It's all there. I bring with me, or the knowledge that's based on my experience. Okay, let's keep going because it is very interesting how she constructs all these ideas. Because as I put in the slide, and those are Joanna's words, of course, when one wants to be free from doubt, The belief in one's success is implicit in the desire. Okay. So we mentioned about belief is instinctual and knowledge based, right? But when I want and I believe something, and I have, I need it to have no hesitation, no doubt, I must believe either instinctually or based on my knowledge that I'll be successful. So fear does not have room to blossom when you believe, regardless of where it comes from, in your success, right? So when we do this, we don't hesitate. I keep thinking Super Bowl, you have I don't know, seconds. You're the quarterback, and you have seconds to decide. Is that the moment to be afraid? Of course not. Is that the moment to hesitate and go over your what you prepared to do in that case? Of course not. You bring all of that with you and you move forward. And I love here, and I highly encourage you to take a moment. I'm not talking about now American football and the Super Bowl, but I highly encourage you to take a moment to view some interesting debates, and they can be seen with all through NASA's experimentation, right, in TED Talks about the subject. And my favorite one in those TED Talks are about how the NASA astronaut has an exhaustive training. They have to do it exhaustively to counter fear of unknown situations. Why is that? Because being an astronaut is exactly being a pioneer and facing the unknown. The space is vast, and boy, we know very little from a percentage of that of the larger unknown. So let's just go ahead and work with that. So my favorite of this TED Talks is the one titled by Chris Hadfield, What I Learned from Going Blind in Space. This is a 2014 talk. It's awesome. A couple of years later, I think in 2017, Mindy Howard has another TED Talk where she says, train your fear away like an astronaut. And not too long ago, a couple of years ago, 2021, there's another TED Talk, which is highlighted as one of the best of the best, where it says, it's titled A NASA's Astronauts' Lessons on Fear, Confidence, and preparing for space flight. So I love it. It's just a plug for you to embark in very digestible bits on this topic, right? But back to Joanna. Joanna contends that we all can access that level of preparedness simply by accessing our own resolve and our own will. And she says that the mental landscape glows with light and the components of unhappiness dissolve under the powerful rays of a well-directed will. So with will, and there's from a philosophy perspective, there's so much on the subject, right? On the desire, the will to something. And once you have that, once you access that idea, your entire mental landscape would be clear, will be glowing with light. But let's keep moving on our talk today because I love the allegory of Plato's cave. And as I put it there in the slide, wanting and believing, those two components, right, lead to struggle wanting and believing, due to the decision to exit in the shadowy cave for the arena of success. And of course, it's very clear she's referencing Plato's allegory, I'm sorry, of the cave. And just for those of us who either it's been too long since you heard about it, or you never heard about it, but in this allegory, Plato's brings this really I believe that one of the most well-known philosophical concepts in history, right? And it's very fun to know that this concept you can see many movies and series of TVs, and they try to incorporate the philosophy. And how do they do that? And why does it do it so well in the context of filmmaking? Well, it is Plato used this allegory to ruminate, to think about the nature of believing something. Remember, belief can be, according to Joanna, can be innate or evidence based, right? But Plato brings in the nature of belief versus knowledge in a different light, and the allegory begins with I always see the little movies with three prisoners who lived their entire lives chained. Yes, they couldn't do anything. They were chained inside the cave. Behind the prisoners, there's a fire, and between the fire and the prisons are some people that are carrying puppets, shadow puppets, and the puppets or the objects they cast a shadow in the opposite wall, and the prisoners facing that wall now watch those shadows and believe. They believe that that is their reality, right? They know nothing else. They have no evidence, no knowledge outside of what's being projected to them. So Plato then in this allegory, he tells us that one prisoner was freed, right? And as he leaves the cave, wow, he now sees the fire, right? And then he also sees that all those shadows, what's being projected into the wall, are just illusions. They're fake, right? And he sees that once he escapes from the cave, he can discover a whole new world outside that he was completely unaware. And he does believe that this outside world is real and much better than the cave. And so he tries to return to the other prisoners, and of course he comes in and he's blinded. He no longer sees because of the he's not accustomed. And the other prisoners look at his blindness and they see, oh, what you're saying is not the truth. And if I go, I'm going to be blinded as well by the sunlight. So it's just a very interesting concept here. And I have to say, I just started not so long ago and I haven't finished. So no spoilers. But I started watching the Apple TV series Silo, which brings many of those elements, right? There is this about 10,000 people living in a silo, man-made, and there is this whole concept of what is reality and what is a projection of the reality, and what about the outside world. Do you have the courage to leave? Do you have the courage to open up for new outcomes? Do you have the courage to, as you leave, and there's early on in the series where it looks like they die or they fall, to as they go through like the Plato's cave, be blinded to something harm, but there's so much more. So, anyways, back to Joanna as we're ending our talk today. She tells us, she will alert us that uh, wanting, believing, right, will lead to success, to achievements. She said, but wait, even after you are successful, based on your your belief and your resolve, right? She says, but it's not transactional. It's not I want unreservedly, Joanna, and I believe that I can do it without a doubt. She says, but you have to continue to look into your own emotional landscape for its own integrity and sense of balance, because the minute that structure of your emotional landscape is in disarray, you can have a relapse. So, to me, it just means that we must stay vigilant in our desire to be well and vigilant to overcome our doubts or questions and to be free. So, when we talk about freedom, right? I wanted to bring here. She brings in the book the story of this paralytic person, this handicapped person that Jesus was uh, and I'll just tell you, but this man is lowered through the roof to to be in the presence of the master. So the parable, and you can find in Mark chapter 2, verses 2 to 11, when he says the following: while he was preaching God's words to them, four men arrived carrying a paralyzed man on a mat. But they couldn't bring him to Jesus, right? There's so many people listening to him. So they went to the roof, they dug a hole, and then they lowered the man in this mat right down in front of Jesus. And Jesus, as this is happening, right? He asks him, "Do you believe I can hear you?" And the man just simply says, "Yes." And with those words, this three letter word, right? The man who was paralyzed demonstrated his belief, his faith. And at the same time, he gave evidence of that, of his will and his belief, that by through the effort that he put to get there, right? And I just wanted to pause here to ask you and me: do we show our will, our desire, our faith with the right level of effort, or do we hesitate? Do we bring doubts and question our decisions? Do we hesitate whenever something happens to balance our resolve, right? The man in this case of the parable set friends and all those people that are willing to help in motion. He submitted to the discomfort. Can you imagine that? To be carried to the roof of a house. And most likely, he probably was subjected to some pain in doing that. I don't know. But all he did was he wanted, and he was successful. He was touched by such effort. Jesus then freed him from his infirmity. And truly, in as part of a conclusion, as you read here, right, in your difficulties and suffering, abandon your complacency about them. in your difficulties and suffering. Abandon your complacency about them and make the firm decision to want to be happy and then believe you can actually be happy. It is so, so important to internalize that because nothing is keeping us from trying. All we really have to do is to go inwardly, right? To go inside of us and understand that the desire to do this is there waiting to be released. So she says, if we just begin all of our efforts, all of our endeavors, being aware, right? Being aware that it's this alignment of if something comes in, poof, get away. I don't want you're trying to rain on my parade. Get away. Or there is maybe a notion of pessimism or I don't know, or question. Just look. Hey, did this other person do this before me? I just remember real quickly a race many lifetimes ago. I was in a race and I was getting to the maybe the last 10% of the race, and I was exhausted. And I was by myself. I'm not a runner. And I said, no, this is it. I can't do it. My body can't keep up. And then right in front of me, a little old lady. I mean, just the caricature of old lady, right? With the just frail. And she just kept running. And I said, oops, she's doing it. She's showing me that I can do it as well. So we can also see that. Let's look for all those people that have been successful, whatever that desire is, the want is, right? And remember, their efforts are not much different than ours. It's just they began earlier, right? And we are not even aware, but they began their process of wanting and executing on that desire before. So now we can see the results. So back to Joanna, just wanted to say that whenever we need and our will is expressed through prayers, please note they are answered, right? Open yourself, open myself to all that we receive, those restorative energy. But let us not put barriers. Let's open the door to connect. And if we want peace, if you want health, just let's believe in that. And it will start, we're starting opening to the that opportunity. So in any case, I'm at the end of our time together, and I hope that you found this entire set of points in this chapter good, because I really believe that suffering, as it's put here, is all about not being able to want, not being able to really believe, and not be able to really decide, right? So, from that perspective, very inspiring chapter. And I hope our discussion today also inspires you, and not only today, but each day to have courage, to have resolve. And I will see you again next week when we talk about ingratitude. Thank you so very much.